Thank you, Dr. Sprague. It is my privilege to address a large group such as this and to also recognize some faces out there in the audience. Mr. Oliver Field from the American Medical Association, who is the director of the Department of Investigation. Mr. Field is a lawyer licensed to practice in the state of Illinois. He's a graduate of Notre Dame University. He has worked with both the Federal Food and Drug Administration as an inspector and also as assistant director in the Denver district. He has been with the American Medical Association since 1948 in the capacity in this Department of Investigation. He has written and prepared articles for publications that are published by the American Medical Association. His topic is of interest to many people, as is witnessed here tonight by the group assembled, of quackery in medicine. At this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Field.
Dr. Phil, Dr. Sprague, distinguished guests, and how many of you have to come here? If I knew, maybe I wouldn't feel so good. Is that the idea? Well, this is, of course, this presentation is a kind of an essay on the steamy side of medicine. We did a couple of tapes this afternoon over at the radio station, and both of them started out, "What is quackery?" And I suppose it's a fair thing to define the subject that you're dealing with. And the best thing that I can recommend to you, if you haven't already done it, go to the dictionary. There you'll find that quackery is pretension to medical skill which people frequently poorly train, the skill that they do not possess. And the essence of all of it is the pretension. Now, there have been some better definitions, more interesting perhaps, but they are nonetheless a rather apt yardstick of what is also called pseudo-medicine. If I may, I'll read that one. And here is the surest index of your age. Probably in many nostrums, and in some of the pseudo-medical treatments of disease or disturbances, there is a grain or two of truth, which, however, has been so magnified and lauded for financial gain that nothing but quackery, deceit, or insanity is left. Dr. Oliver Wendell Holmes' definition of a pseudoscience cannot be improved on. He said that the beliefs consist of positive assertions, and all sustaining evidence is received, and all negative evidence is denied. Now think about that a little bit. And it is invariably connected with some lucrative practical application. Its possessors and practitioners are usually shrewd people. They are very serious with the public, but wink and laugh a good deal among themselves. The believing multitude consists of women of both sexes, feeble-minded inquirers, poetical optimists, people who always get cheated in buying horses, philanthropists who insist on hurrying up the millennium, and others of this class, with here and there a clergyman, less frequently a lawyer, very rarely a physician, and almost never a horse jockey or a member of the detective force. A pseudoscience does not necessarily consist, he says, wholly of lies. It may contain many truths and even valuable ones. The rottenest bank starts with a little specie. It puts out 1,000 promises to pay on the strength of a single dollar. But the dollar is very commonly a good one. Now this was published in JAMA, which is the Journal of the American Medical Association, for July 2, 1904. It was called, the paper itself, The Scourge of Nostrums and Irregular Practitioners, by Oliver T. Osborne, M.D., Professor of Materia Medica and Therapeutics at Yale University. This was the chairman's address before the section on Materia Medica, Pharmacy and Therapeutics, the 55th annual session of the AMA at Atlantic City in June 1904. Now, as long as I'm from AMA, I work for the doctors. Perhaps you'd like to know what it is. It's an organization of doctors, an Illinois corporation, organized not for profit. The expressed corporate purposes, the advancement of the science and art of medicine, and for the betterment of the public health. And in seeking to achieve these ends, the association publishes not only JAMA, each week to more than 200,000 doctors, but also 10 specialty journals each month. One for the surgeons, one for the pathologists, one for the pediatricians, the ophthalmologists, men in industrial medicine, and so on. We publish each month Today's Health, which is as reliable a source of information for the public on health matters as is published. We publish also for the medical profession itself a little sheet, well, it's more than that, each week called AMA News, which is not given over to the scientific aspects of medicine, more the socioeconomic and news and so on. Now, AMA gets its strength from the local medical societies. In other words, for a doctor to belong, first he must be admitted to and be a member of his local medical society in the county or the city in which he practices. The county or local societies elect their delegates to the state convention. In turn, on the basis of doctor population per state, one delegate per 1,000 doctors. The delegates go to AMA conventions, and there they set the policies of medicine. There are, of course, the great exhibits, the advances in medicine shown to those who attend. There are, of course, many papers in the various sections, and the various aspects of medicine having the interest of certain physicians. But what I'm seeking to point out to you is that all in medicine does not percolate from AMA. It comes up the other way. We don't even have jurisdiction over discipline of our members. We can't throw a doctor out if he has misbehaved, and I can give you examples right here. This is the business of the local medical society, and this, of course, is as it should be. They are the best judges. We do have machinery for appeal if the doctor is dissatisfied with the verdict of his fellows in his own bailiwick. Now, we do have, of course, other activities at AMA. This coming weekend, the Council on Medical Education will meet. The council was formed in about 1905 by the House of Delegates as a committee of the House of Delegates. Medical education in those days was pretty bad. Some areas it was a spawning ground for quacks. We had one man who, in our own employee, who went into a medical school 2 or 3 nights a week. He told them that he was a railroad conductor and couldn't be there any more often. And then they kept him on until they learned that he was employed by AMA and he had to leave town. But the school went out of business. At the turn of the century, there were over 180 medical schools. A good many of them not worthy of the name. Some of them were nothing more than diploma mills. And imagine trusting yourself or your family, children, to a poorly trained man. As a matter of fact, that is exactly what happened. which culminated in the establishment of this department of ours. A young school teacher up in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, at the turn of the century, lost an only child, and he was satisfied that he had called upon a quack. He didn't damn the medical profession. He stopped his teaching. He went to what is now Marquette School of Medicine up in Milwaukee. When he graduated, he came down to Chicago to work for AMA as an editorial assistant. And he got busy exposing the quack, the patent medicine manufacturer. He had a running literary drumfire of expository articles in our publication and in some others. Now, of course, he stepped on people's toes. Fact of the matter is, we counted up one time. We'd been sued no less than 42 times in a 30-year period for libel and slander. Sum total claimed in damages, $24 million. Sum total recovered, 1 cent. Dr. Cramp had allowed us how here was a pillar of the church on Sunday and a so-and-so the other 6 days of the week selling an alcoholic nostrum to women. The jury apparently felt bringing in the church affiliation was carrying the matter a little too far. So they found him guilty of libel, assessed the damages at 1 cent, and then charged the plaintiff with the cost. And the trial lasted more than 4 months. So we don't feel too bad about that. Now, of course, you understand that the name investigation, I guess it's for want of something better in the way of a name. We are not medical policemen. There is a connotation, but nonetheless it isn't so. Our efforts are generally in the way of education, propaganda, letting the public know there are quacks on the land, letting them know how to spot them, and seeking aid and assistance from the enforcement agencies, both national and local and state agencies, to make it tougher, to enforce the laws that are meant to protect the public. First Pure Food and Drug Act was passed in 1906. This was an improvement. There was nothing on the statute books. The patent medicine industry fought like Kilkenny cats, I guess. I wasn't there. But there were clauses in advertising contracts that if the editorial policy of the paper favored new food and drug legislation, then the contracts were automatically terminated. That was the atmosphere of 1906. I thought I had an example of 1906, but I guess I haven't. One of my favorites. Well, I'll see if I have it. I usually tell the age of my audience by the reaction when I say that this is Lydia E. Pinkham's vegetable compound. Contains 18% alcohol. This is added solely as a solvent and preservative for prolapsus uteri or falling of the womb and other female weaknesses. Pleasant to the taste and strongly recommended as efficacious and as a good help in pregnancy and relieving pain during labor. Directions: a tablespoonful every 4 hours throughout the day. For any of the above complaints, take the bottle before using. You will have to take my word for it. The attrition of travel has taken out the bottom line, which said new style 1906. Before 1906, there was no mention of the chief medicinal ingredient in this bottle, and there was this legend instead of for prolapsus uteri, a sure cure for prolapsus uteri. And as a fellow says, if the lady isn't used to taking alcoholic beverages and she follows these directions, her outlook on life is bound to improve. It wasn't until about 1937, most of you will not recall, the sulfa elixir episode. This graphically described the inadequacies, of the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906. More than 100 people died down in the southern states after taking sulfa elixir. The product was, of course, in those days, a wonder drug. The sulfas were new, they were effective in a good many conditions which heretofore could not be treated adequately. They are still valuable drugs. This was an over-the-counter preparation. The manufacturer ran out of glycerin. He substituted ethylene glycol. Do you recognize good old permanent antifreeze? Can you understand why people would die from drinking it? The Congress got mad enough to pass the 1938 Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, which required full disclosure of active ingredients, the amounts of potent drugs, of such things as alcohol, of course this is just a continuation, and full directions for use, and when such directions could not be given, then the drug may be sold only on prescription. There were also requirements in the law that the labeling be truthful. Now, this, of course, has been, up until the last 2 years, one of the principal activities of the Food and Drug Administration so far as drugs are concerned. False and misleading claims, therapeutic claims, in the labeling. In recent years, they have also charged inadequate directions for use. This is a tie-in of claims made in newspaper advertising with the rather, shall we say, innocuous claims made on the label. These rascals have even tried to, it's accompanying labeling, they have even tried to send the labels one direction and the product the other direction on the claim that they did not accompany each other in interstate commerce. The Supreme Court of the United States saw through that one rather quickly, and no matter how they manage to meet up, they are, the literature and the product accompany each other. Now, we have had, of course, since 1962, as a result of the thalidomide episode, most interesting in that this was a tranquilizer as you could find on the market. You could not commit suicide with it. The only people it was unsafe with was apparently pregnant mothers. Pregnant women, I'm sorry. Now, sometimes these odd twists do come up with some very interesting results. The burden came on the manufacturer to prove that what he said about his product was true. This is the Kefauver-Harris Amendment. One of the side effects of that amendment to the law and the regulations that were promulgated to implement it was enabling the Food and Drug Administration to take a good, hard look at cryobiology. This is the reason why there is an indictment pending in Chicago today. They got some most interesting facts when they really went in to look at it. And of course, this will all come out in the wash, I suppose. Now, our part in such things has been the innocent bystander. We've been pilloried and we've been even sued. I happen to be a defendant in a lawsuit, and I'm obliged, if the lawsuit were found in favor of the plaintiffs who claim they are cancer patients whose lives depend on cryobiology, I am enjoined from having anything to do with their inability to get it. They're getting it. Now, let's take a look at cancer quackery. This is the biggest single item of quackery in the United States today. Not in the matter of money wasted, lives lost perhaps, but it is the matter that has the greatest interest in the public, and I say that by reason of the volume of inquiries as compared to the volume of inquiries on other categories of disease. But cancer quackery we've had with us for many, many years. They come and they go. I have one here. And have I any doctors of medicine in the audience? Well, it isn't necessary. I would ask, are they acquainted with the Alexander treatment, a relief and remedy for malignant growths by hypodermic injection? An account of a demonstration of results obtained by its use made in the presence of 40 members of the medical profession in Boston, April 17, 1900. This is an advertising piece for the Alexander treatment, which was introduced to the medical profession in 1900. Newspaper publicity? Of course. What did they say? Boston Herald, April 18, 1900. Cancer cure demonstrated. Noted physicians and surgeons are in attendance. Boston Transcript, April 25, 1900. An efficient cancer remedy. Hypodermic injection seems likely to take the place of surgical operations in the treatment of malignant growth. Good results achieved by its use. Then we have the cases demonstrated in Boston to the medical profession and to the public, incidentally. Then we have these case histories. Now, we don't know how long this lasted. All we know is that, well, I should tell you that we don't throw anything out that comes in. This was received in the department March 5, 1915. So we know that this one lasted at least that long. Our chemists analyzed the product, a little bit of carbolic acid in oil. They reported the value at about 35 cents. Sold then at $35 the bottle. What did Dr. Holmes say? Always a practical, lucrative application. A similar meeting was held in Chicago in 1951. Noted physicians and surgeons were in attendance. Case histories were demonstrated, and cases were noted in a booklet that was introduced there. It was alleged that of 22 patients, 12 were still alive. It wasn't so, but that's the way it was told. Now, all I say to you is that what happened in 1900 is no different from what happened in 1951. There is this likelihood: there will never be another Tobias because of the Kefauver-Harris Amendment to the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. The American public has been victimized as it has never been victimized before, and it'll all come out in the wash. Would you like to see an ampule of carbamazine? Carry it along just in case of an emergency. I don't know whether you can see it or not. Just a little glass ampule with a label on it. The chemists analyzed this, too. Not this one, just one of this batch. On an infrared spectrophotometer. This is labeled to be one part of this substance, whatever it is. They say they brought it in. To 100,000 parts of light, or NF number 9 mineral oil. On the infrared spectrophotometer, the contents of a vial of carbamazine match perfectly that of mineral oil. The government, in its investigation, it's already been reported in the court, were handed a tiny amount, 10 milligrams, I think. You get it on the tip of your fingernail and your thumb. We're told by The doctor who brought it in says he did. And thanks to advances in microchemistry and the total recall of a college student who was working during the summer in the laboratory, drug lab, they identified this powder, which he was pretty sure they couldn't identify, as creatine, and proved it by adding hydrochloric acid to make creatinine. And of course they're screaming bloody murder. That wasn't crubiazine. They also came in one Saturday morning. Place was running, open for business. They were selling it over the counter. 2 days after, he had told the agents of the government that he didn't have only enough crubiazine left to make from 500 to 1,500 ampules. They caught him making 5,000. But people think they owe their lives to it. And this is a horrible part of the whole business. They've done such a thorough job of fooling the American public. A great segment of it. Even to United States senators. And they say, oh, we want the fair test. Well, now, what else do we have here? Another one that perhaps you've forgotten about. How many of you have heard of the Hoxsey treatment for cancer? Nobody? They die fast, don't they? This one was very popular from 1924 to 1960. Dr. Hoxsey, they called him Doctor down there in Dallas. We know he went to the 8th grade. We're not sure whether or not he graduated. He had a diploma as a naturopath that apparently he bought. They conferred on him a license as a naturopath in Texas. Finally, the state was successful in getting that, having him join practicing. But this man did a fantastic job of selling. And he used a very interesting approach, the religious approach. Of course, they all write books. Hoxsey hired a fellow to write a book for him. He's illiterate, so he couldn't write it himself, but you'd think he did. Nonetheless, he took in millions. The nurse in one of the lawsuits, he liked to file lawsuits too against people who disagreed with him, who made this material, got up on the stand and told how she made it for 7 years in Hoxsey's basement. She took a gallon glass jug. She filled it half full of tap water. She added 4 ounces each of Cascara sagrada, a well-known laxative, and potassium iodide. She shook the mixture well, put the jug up under the tap, and filled it. Cost less than 50 cents. Selling price to hopeful cancer patients, $800. Always some practical, lucrative application. The government was successful in obtaining an injunction against the interstate distribution of that nostrum. It took some doing. They had to threaten the trial court with contempt of court before he would sign an injunction. He was morally certain he owed his life to Hoxsey. This is a federal judge. So what did they do? They took all the water out of it. It was 96% water anyway. Sold pills. Same price. And the seizure action in Philadelphia, this was shipped into Philadelphia from Detroit. It was shown that in 1 year, a little over a year this was, Mr. Hoxsey had taken in over $1,600,000 from hopeful cancer patients. Now he's enjoined, but we're getting reports south of the border, and they're going there. Oh, I could tell you a story about Hoxsey. I said religious. This is a religious magazine. A page from the Defenders of the Christian Faith. Remember? Gerald Winrod out in Kansas. in amongst the Bible stories, the sermons, the tales of missionary activities, and so on, would be stories about Hoxsey and his medical mecca for cancer victims. This was even broadcast from Mexico. Come a little closer to home. Defender readers are familiar with the charming story of 5-year-old Kathy Allison of South Bend, Indiana, who, given up in 1954 to die of cancer, was cured by the Hoxsey treatment as administered at Dallas. She was even shown to a joint session of the Pennsylvania legislature as an example of a cure. She wasn't cured. She had a temporary remission as a result of the effects of X-ray treatment. She had a bone tumor. She died in 1955, October, of the recurrence. Nonetheless, we have National Christian Crusader for May 15, 1956. This looks kind of religious too, but it isn't. It says here, Senator charges American Cancer Society and American Medical Association are suppressing cancer cure. Which one? Down here they say child given up to die is saved by man, AMA calls a quack. Only thing wrong is this is 7 months after she's dead. National Christian Crusaders. You see, these quacks are smart enough to know that the people will trust religious tracts. We even had a Monsignor who was traveling around the country telling what wonderful things Hoxsey was doing. You'd wonder. And of course you can't blame the clergy alone. As we said, United States Senators. This is one. Dear Dad, I became his first cancer patient. Remarks of Honorable Charles W. Tobey of New Hampshire in the Senate of the United States. Wednesday, June 12, 1951. What Senator Tobey did not tell his confreres in the Senate was that his son was the business partner of the doctor who had the bacteriophage. Now, the bacteriophage is a polyvalent bacteriophage. Trouble with bacteriophages, they were so specific they weren't practical. But this was different. This is not only good for cancer, for multiple sclerosis, for infectious sinusitis, for tuberculosis, diabetes, muscular dystrophy, arthritis. He added, and this is a quote, and all the diseases the cause of which is unknown. But another one of these congressional record promotions by Senator Tobey again told of a young doctor down in Austin, Texas, whose patient had become miraculously well after she had, you don't inject this stuff, you don't drink it, you don't rub it on, you sniff it. The other end hooks onto an oxygen tank, and the medicine goes in here, and the fact of the matter is, Dr. Lincoln's business got so good he threw out all the oxygen tanks. He got himself a compressor, such as you'd find in a filling station. He had lines running out through all the doors and windows. He was given curb service at $5 for 10 minutes of sniff. So written up in Life magazine. But this Texas patient, steadfast, no appetite. For all intents and purposes, he was almost dead. This is the story the doctor told me, that at the insistence of a relative who was a naturopath nearby, he succumbed to family pressure and did administer this material. And he said, do you know, she got up out of bed, her appetite returned, her cough stopped. But the disease didn't, and she died on schedule. But the effect of the medicine, see? This is one of the reasons why these fellows do so well in certain instances. The exact course of disease is never exactly known. And they can attribute to their product, particularly in the diseases that have their ups and downs, like arthritis and so on, they attribute to their product the benefit, which happened to be given, the product given at the same time the disease was in remission. Oh, we have some other things. How many of you remember Hadacol? This is the story of had a call called Good Health. It is life's greatest blessing. This is a picture of Senator LeBlanc. Do you remember him? He was all over the country with his product. When it was so popular, I used to tell people I'd much rather have Lydia Pinkham because it was 15% alcohol and Hadacol was only 12. But they tell the story of Hadacol, and then by way of testimonial, they tell of wonderful cures. Well, here's anemia. And these are all by way of letters and pictures of people who claim to have gotten the benefit. Arthritis, asthma. But look at here. Diabetes. And stories have come in how diabetics on insulin and in good control suddenly went out of control because the person had believed this, had quit the insulin, and were taking Hadacol. This is the vicious part of quackery, when people are getting along in an unhappy situation and then have the rug out from under them. Epilepsy, heart trouble, and high blood pressure. What's the next one? Low blood pressure and gallstones, paralytic stroke, ulcers, and down at the end, tuberculosis. Now, Hadacol had a few vitamins, a few minerals, including iron, to make it taste bad, and 12% alcohol, which was the chief medical ingredient. Now I have a few other things. Speaking of vitamins and minerals, I have a few over there. I have one interesting one, though, here, I think. Has some physical connotation. You know, there are many, many forms of quackery. The clever ones will follow a new concept and popularize it. I wonder when outer space medicine is going to have some quack moon dust or something. But when radio first became popular in the late 19-teens and the early 1920s, there was an old rascal of a doctor out in San Francisco, Dr. Abrams. And when these things were popular, he came up with a system of medicine which he called the electronic reactions of Abrams. He would pretend to diagnose from a drop of the blood. The patient didn't have to be there. He put the drop of blood on a piece of blotting paper and mailed it to him. He in turn would put it in his machine, which he called the dynamizer. He'd have that connected to a healthy young subject. I understand sometimes they were students in need of an extra $1. He would percuss the abdomen of this healthy subject, which was facing west in a darkened room, and from areas of dullness which he would find on such abdomen, would announce what was wrong with the patient who was perhaps 1,000 miles away. This went along for years, from those early teens until 1958, when the government was able to enjoin his successors. And it is late as 1962 that they were obliged to surrender their charter because they were found to be violating the terms of the injunction, and they were threatened with criminal contempt. Now, Abrams had the treatment machines in the offices of his, well, I suppose you'd call them correspondents. And these poorly trained individuals, probably products of these sundown schools and so on, they would lease his machines, paying him a monthly rental. He would lease only to doctors of medicine and osteopaths. This left the poor chiropractor out in the cold. The chiropractor came up with a good many imitations. Some of them were pretty clever. One of them, called the radio class, is in a class by itself. Looks like a great big radio. It has a master control on it, which has positions for off, diagnose, PR, it might be prognose, treat, double treat, treat and test. And wouldn't it be wonderful if it worked? attach the patient to the electrodes, and you turn to the right disease, and you give them a little direct current, high-frequency current. The fact of the matter is, I used to demonstrate this one by getting the same current when the machine was turned off. And in the manual of instructions, the purchaser was told, be sure the machine is turned on. Could be a little embarrassing to treat disease that way. But anyway, now we're getting over to what I started to say. This is the Drown radiotherapeutic instrument. How many of you have heard of this one? You're a rare one. Mrs. Drown was indicted for grand theft in California last October. She's been out of interstate commerce for some years. Now, this machine, of course, has the slot, maybe you can see it, I hope you can, where you put the blotting paper with the spot of blood in there. This is not connected to house current in any way. You have the dissimilar metals on these electrodes, German, silver, and block tin. One to the midsection, the other to the soles of the feet. The sweat would make the microammeter move, and you could adjust it slightly. This, of course, would make the user, the believer really, think that he or she was getting benefit from this device. Mrs. Brown would take the readings and send them to the poor soul with instructions. And this particular poor soul, the particular day that the machine was exposed in the Chicago Tribune as a fake, called in. And he wanted to know, was that true? And we told him it was, and he said he had a machine. And we asked if he'd bring it in. He said he would. We asked if he'd mind if the Food and Drug Administration saw it. And they all came in at 2 o'clock that afternoon. We took it into our physical lab. We melted the solder on the 4 wood screws at the corners of this little plate. We showed a graduate engineer a simple Galvani circuit, and he had been treating his wife's breast cancer with it. He was an embarrassed man, but he did go out and testify as the government's prosecution witness in the misbranding trial of the Drown, or Mrs. Drown. They prosecuted her, and the state of California has gotten around to it in 1964. So, this is an example of people who really should know better than to be taken in. But it has been observed that the intelligentsia are easier dulled than just us common ordinary folks. One more here of some local interest, I hope, is the Ocean 44 trace chemicals. This is chemical smorgasbord, Ponce de Leon's error, sea brine dosage, glands are factories, cobalt versus sterility, magnesium versus insanity, zinc for pancreas. Now, all of this are titles of syndicated articles in newspapers. This is George W. Crane, the syndicated newspaper writer. Ever read his column? And here we go. The Ocean 44 trace chemicals, antidotes for deficiency ailments. And here are the suggested deficiency ailments: acne, allergy, anemia, arthritis, baldness, cancer, caries, cataracts, cirrhosis, diabetes, epilepsy, gray hair, high blood pressure, leukemia, multiple sclerosis, muscular dystrophy, myasthenia gravis, Parkinson's, psoriasis, and schizophrenia. This is by Dr. George W. Crane, Ph.D., M.D., author, lecturer, educator, doctor of medicine, member of the American Medical Association, and he is. Psychologist, member of the Pan-American Psychological Association, whatever that is. And he is the Papa of Scientific Psychology. And this is a copyright, 1960, the Hopkins Syndicate Incorporated. And it's right over here in western Indiana, and I can't give you the exact location. But who do you suppose is the president of the Hopkins Syndicate, Inc.? Dr. Crane. Always the practical, lucrative application. When the butlers of the Atlantic Ocean added that as the labeling, the Atlantic Ocean became contraband in interstate commerce. Well, now what else have we got? Are we running a little too long here? I was down in Franklin one time here not too many years ago. I gave a little talk. This old campaign of trying to make skeptics out of people. And one man got up and left, and I thought, oh boy, is he disgusted. But he came back. And with him he had this. It's getting pretty, travel worn, but as you can plainly see, it's good for you from top to bottom. What makes it go? Flashlight batteries. And when these are dead, of course. When they're alive and you push this button up, you'll get a tickle out of this thing. But what made it contraband? What made it violated so far as the Food and Drug Administration is concerned? The claims. These are what they said to the people. Now, this man, whose son and his widow actually gave me this, was a clergyman, also an arthritic, and would do anything to try to relieve the pain. Here is what the owner said, the distributor. Electrete, meaning to treat with electricity. Lowers the positive pole, relieves pain, soothes, takes away inflammation, breaks up congestion. Barrel is the negative pole. Increases circulation, stimulates, relaxes muscles, builds up weak parts. Now, electrete negative adds health. Electrete positive subtracts disease. Flabby tissue, broken bones, varicose veins, and perspiring feet. And if that doesn't meet your needs, we have number 24, sick all over. And our spoiled sports, the Food and Drug Administration, took after this old man. They accused him of misbranding. Went to trial in Peoria, Illinois, where it was made and sold. Pleaded guilty. Got his fine. Walked into the clerk's office and paid it. Walked outside and looked around, and he owned the best part of downtown Peoria. Why should he keep on? So what did he do? He sold it to some California promoters. I was out there a couple of years ago, and I asked one of the food and drug people, can you still get them? He said, yep. But if you go to California and you want one of these, don't ask for electric mechanical heart. Our quacks, keep up. This is now called atomic new life. Let's see, what else? Neutralite, Vitacox, Vicin. These are the house-to-house vitamin preparations, all supposedly containing very wonderful base made of alfalfa, parsley, and watercress. When this thing started, about 10 years ago, they were around selling it from house to house, making some preposterous claims. Even in the manual for the salesman, there was implication that this was even specific for feeble-mindedness. The government again stepped in. They had a rough time. They finally got a consent injunction against the misbranding of this product by booklets, leaflets, reprints, and even books. Fattest books. One of the provisions before any new promotional material was put out, it must be passed on by FDA. What do you suppose our friends did? They advertised, we are the only vitamin and mineral house in the country that has all of its advertising approved by the federal government. We had to start another action to make them stop that. The Boston sales manager found things so good, he went out on his own, His own product, Vitratox, with all these vitamins, all these minerals, and alfalfa, parsley, and watercress. He spent 11 months in a federal correctional institution for lying about this product. The lady in Detroit who had the agency there made the mistake of trying to hire 2 food and drug inspectors as salesmen. She was only fined $250. One or two more. You've seen the ads in the pulp magazines for spot reducer. The girl had it on her tummy. This is the spot reducer. It has some use as a miniature plumber's friend, but it won't take it off here and put it there, you know. Now I have another one here from California this time. This is a breast developer. See how clever these birds are? This implies that it'll work. Because pretty soon you're going to need this, and if this isn't satisfactory, I hate to tell you, mine I got from the Food and Drug Administration. They seized quantities of these things and found in interstate commerce. They don't work. For those who don't like machinery, we've got pills for the same purpose. These are called Curve-On. Worldwide Pharmaceutical Distributing Company, 505 North LaSalle Street, Chicago. I sent my little secretary over there with a $5 bill, and she came back with this. We took it into one of the doctors on the staff of the Council on Drugs. That's the committee that evaluates the new prescription drugs that come on the market and report on them to the medical profession. But he took one look at the statement of, quote, active ingredients. Solid extract of Galaga in an anise and tricalcium phosphate base. And he handed them back to me, and he said, well, he says, if these will do it, so will Smith Brothers cough drops. Well, we laugh. But believe me, it's a very serious thing. So serious, a menace to the public, that in 1961, the Food and Drug Administration and AMA combined to put on a Congress on Medical Quackery. They had over 700 people there interested, discussed the problem and what to do about it. Since that time, there has been a step up in food and drug activity. The other federal agencies who took part, the Post Office Department, were very successful in downstate Indiana here not too long ago. The man who was going around with this colon filling station, the detoxicolon, Mr. D. Wells, I think he's now in a federal pen, charged with using the mails to defraud. Federal Trade Commission, of course, are the ones who pass on the advertising, the truthfulness of advertising on drug products. Their procedures are a little bit unwieldy. For instance, they tried for 17 years to get the word liver out of Carter's little liver pill. They got it out all right. They shouldn't have had to spend 17 years doing it, but they did. And there have been some other examples of long-time activity or effort to stop certain abuses of the public. After all Carter's little pills are laxative pills. And then in October 1963, a second Congress was held. This put the emphasis on education. The effort will be made to get into the curricula of the secondary schools something in the health education course aimed at making skeptics out of the coming generation. We hope and we know that these curricula are way overcrowded now. We hope that the profession, the teaching profession, will, shall we say, accept the seriousness of the situation and make an effort to vaccinate the upcoming generation. So I thank you very much. I hope that I have made skeptics of you, and perhaps you'll pass it along as you go on in your careers. I'll answer one or two questions. Yes, sir. Well, there were negotiations. Fact of the matter is, the people from the foundation in New York City, trying to remember the name now, but when they got to look over what they were buying, you know, they were careful. They found the largest single item in the inventory to be a $760,000 tax lien. He had forgotten to pay for these taxes on the alcohol. So the sale didn't go through. Yes? Just about as legitimate as Hadacol. Same thing. Well, the Federal Trade Commission are after them for false and misleading claims in their television and other advertising. But here again, you see? Yes, sir. Well, in matters of therapeutic problems, the men who are best trained, who are getting the best training in the world now, are your doctors of medicine. The best thing to do if there's something really wrong is to go to your doctor. If there's nothing wrong, if it's just something temporary, maybe you can handle it by some simple method. Yes. Yes, I'd be very happy to. I have an assistant who wrote to 7 of the 15 chiropractic schools, described himself as a non-high school graduate, and he was accepted in 5 of them and rejected reluctantly on the other 2. He made himself out to be a pretty poor prospect for a profession. And the chiropractic profession is based on a false premise, and they make martyrs out of themselves, and they are very clever promoters in legislatures and amongst the public. They're good salesmen, but what they've got to offer, it's as the man said, all of the tribes of the earth love to have their backs rubbed, and it remains for the Americans to make a profession out of it.
We want to thank you, Mr. Field, for this excellent presentation and for your kind and interested audience here. I want to remind you of 2 things tomorrow, of the 2 speeches we have tomorrow of Dr. Carlos at 9 o'clock in the morning in the Emmons Auditorium, and at 11 o'clock, Dr. Hartman.